Now, these are really 3 tips, which is why I give you about 6. You get bonus tips. And it's all based on the fact that for a very long time, we've been doing a lot of research on how do you improve your core web vitals. And there's not a lot of things where Google says, this is important, and they tell you it's important a year in advance. But Core Web Vitals, they did say, and they tied it into page experience. So what I want to be able to do is explain to you how it actually goes together. And I want to make sure you see my email up on the screen. If you have questions, certainly let me know. And you can email me after the presentation, whatever you need. The concept from Google for what is the page experience update is that it's all the things you see on your screen, 3 of which used to be 4, but Google removed 1. Google has changed this a number of times. It used to be 4. The 3 things at the top identified as Core Web Vitals, that is the cornerstone of today's presentation. Now, what is interesting about the way it's been packaged is it seems to be that Google cares that the user experience is better, or people just won't keep using Google. I think Google has figured out that if people are happier with the results they get from Google, that they'll keep using Google. And, it's one thing to be giving answers, and it's another thing entirely to be giving answers where people are really happy with your answers. So what we're going to see is that there's a lot of things that are going on. We are talking today about Core Web Vitals. Now, I will mention the bottom 4, which have to do predominantly with page experience. The bottom 4 have been around forever. Mobile friendly, Mobilegeddon was years ago. Safe browsing is clear. You can't have malware, things like that. Secure, been around for a long time. It's a significant trust signal. And intrusive interstitials. Those are those little things that pop up as soon as you go to a website that says, what's your zip code? Or do you want to subscribe to my newsletter? And they pop up like instantly. And those are clearly a problem. By the way, the way to get around that being a problem is you either do it on exit instead of entry, or you delay it, say, 20 seconds, and then you pop them up. If you have to pop it up in order to have your site work, then just be prepared that you may have a hit. Google doesn't really like those. And those things you typically see across the bottom about cookies, as long as it is a minor fraction of the web page, those aren't going to bother you. If it is the whole web page, then it's probably going to bother you. We think 20% is the maximum of the displayed area. So we want to keep it down. We don't want it to be big. We've got to make it work for everybody. So that's where we're going with this. In general, those areas that are in the page experience area, the gray boxes at the bottom, that's not for today, but those are things you have to do. The ones at the top are the ones that we care about. Now, I'm going to go ahead and mention that we have been doing research on this for a very long time. I mean, in internet years, it's a long time. And we have written papers and ebooks and webinars and all sorts of things. It turns out that the Core Web Vitals have a tendency to upset people. First, the names alone have a tendency to make people think it's too techy for them to implement. The actual process of implementation is really tough. I mean, you almost need to be a programmer to be able to do that. The way you would measure it are in tools that Google has written and keep rewriting. And they're somewhat misleading if you aren't careful. So I'm going to mention this, write it down, or print it, or whatever you might. This is a guide to Core Web Vitals. And we have a webinar that goes with it, which includes a very lengthy, almost hour Q&A session with programmers that get into the technical details of it. It's designed really more so for a technical audience, but it fully explains what we're talking about. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through what it really is all about. Technically, all of the page experience factors you should have already solved a long time ago. If you haven't, you have to fix that. Mobile friendliness has been around forever. So let's just take those off the table. That's why I'm focusing on Core Web Vitals. They have one called Largest Contentful Paint. And I'll get into that in a second. The largest contentful paint is fundamentally the amount of time it takes to load the largest image, if you will. First input delay. How long does it take when you show a box for a user to be able to type in the box? What is the delay that is on the website for that box to actually be operating? And then contentful layout shift, cumulative layout shift, is really the problem we've all seen. You go to a page, there's a box that says, I do not want to buy. You go to click on the I do not want to buy, an ad gets inserted at the top of the page. It pushes down the content, and suddenly you clicked on the I want to buy button. And there's no real easy way to get out of it. So when the content is shifting because of dynamic content on the page, Google considers this to be a serious problem. It is not a good user experience to do that. Now, there's a lot of things you can do to solve it, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But let's just understand, Google is after user experience here. And some of it is technical. And the technical components, these three items, those technical components are very technical. Let's just understand that. A web designer struggles with them. A programmer solves them. And I know that sounds a little strange. And I mean, Google is not likely to want to come up with things that are that hard to do, but they did. And that's why they gave us a year. This is a tough set of problems. Now, there's all sorts of things out there that can help you, but, and I'll get into all those. Matter of fact, I'll tell you a lot of things that you can do to make things better. So, Core Web Vitals are signals. Now, in the beginning, as I said, there were 4. And Google actually said, if you are what's called green, if you are savvy in all of the 4 categories, and you have good scores, then you are going to get a ranking boost in Google. So your ranking boost was going to be based on the fact that you had successfully gotten all of them, which is hard. I don't know of anybody really that has done a great job of getting all of them. And it's tough if you have anything exotic. E-commerce is really hard. So we're going to be going through what we have and figuring out how we can make it a little bit better for everybody. The second part of this, and the part that I think makes sense, is that Google then decided they were unbundling them, and that they were separate elements in the algorithm. This is just an example of how things change in this area. Then Google decided that they were going to remove one of them. And in the process, although they had given us a March release date for this, they actually didn't release it until August 15th. That's what we as SEOs have had to deal with. The definition changes, the importance changes, and the release date changes, and we don't know what else is going to change. And then this morning, they totally rewrote and released a new version of PageSpeed Insights that have entirely new back-end stuff. We've analyzed it, again, it's only been today, but we've analyzed it, and they changed how they measure speed. But speed is an important consideration. Suddenly it's a new number. I was 96 on my speed score. I used to be 100. I slowed it down in order to get better scores in my LCP. Got it. As soon as they changed it, I was a 46. So maybe they just cut it in half. You don't know what they're doing. But the scores totally changed. And the presentation is different than what it was before. If you have not today run PageSpeed Insights against your domain, go to Google, type in Google PageSpeed Insights. It'll give you your developer link. Go there, put in your domain. You will see what your scores are. Now, historically, Google has indicated that to get a green, you have to be close to 90%. Well, if they just changed everything, I don't know how easy that's going to be. But understand that that's where we're going with this. So we're focused on that. Largest contentful paint. Now, if you technically read into all this, that is really how long it takes for your largest piece of content to load. So in this particular case, I'll just tell you right now, I put in a preloader that all it does is load my largest image and then goes to my website. So my LCP score, I have finessed it because it loads immediately. It doesn't load as a time of my entire page. It's just my largest image. So I do a preprocessor that preloads the image. It helps. But would you do it? Maybe, maybe not. Do you care? How fast is your page? We have it. And a vast majority of the time, you don't even see it. You don't even know it happened. And we have a custom version, and you don't even see it. Sometimes it'll show up in PageSpeed Insights, but not always. So what we want to be able to do is get through this, understand that Google wants to keep track of how fast your largest image loads. And your largest image should load in under, fanfare, 2.5 seconds. I think it actually should load much faster. I've got a table later. Again, they changed everything. So we're going to double check that. So logically, you can see here on the slide that there's thresholds, and we want to be green. 2.5 seconds. We don't know about today's new software, but 2.5 seconds. So I'm going to stick with that. It could be something that is loaded from your own website. It could be at your largest image, usually like a hero banner or something like that. If it's a video and you're loading it from YouTube, it doesn't seem to be a problem. By the way, CSS and JavaScript are big problems in a lot of things, not necessarily here. So just keep track of that. Heading, tables, whatever your largest content is. Now, I haven't seen it, we haven't done it, but I understand that WordPress has the ability to lazy load actual page content. So the content doesn't have to load right up front. And if you're in WordPress, you could lazy load it and finesse having to do a preload. But I haven't seen it in the wild yet. So we're still paying attention to that. First input delay. Now, first input delay is a little bit, let's just call it different. First input delay is how long it takes for an interaction element, like a query box or something like that, to be active. Now, you could easily say, I don't have a query box, but I'd be willing to bet you everybody has a search box at the top of their web page, or many, and that's a query box. So how long until that box can be used? And it's a user-centric metric that determines how long the user has to wait to engage with your content. Now, I personally don't think that this is that big of a deal. I mean, unless it is measured in hours, I'd say that's probably not a big deal. First input delay, almost everybody is green. Virtually everybody's green. There's not a lot of stuff that goes on with first input delay. I don't think we have to worry about it. By the way, there's a rumor, and I don't know if it's actual or not, that this may be having a name change to responsiveness. I think that what is going on is some of these technical labels is discouraging people from doing them. And so if they just change it to responsiveness, it sounds friendlier and more people might actually optimize their sites. Just an opinion. But what we have is first input delay, how long until I can interact with that particular web page. Now, what is acceptable there, you can see that, folks, that's 1/10 of a second. That's 100 milliseconds. 1/10 of a second. You have to be able to interact with your page. If you have something on your page and you just can't interact with it, heavy JavaScript or some sort of strange process, you're going to have to get a programmer in there to figure out how you optimize that, or you're going to have to figure out how to move it off the top of the page so that it's a delay. You can lazy load a lot of different kinds of things. You can delay load some things. You can, I'll get into that when I get into my discussion in the middle. But first input delay is all about being responsive. And if they're going to change the name, it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me at all. But how long does it take before I can interact with the web page? That's what's mattering here. The next area is something called cumulative layout shift. Now, this certainly sounds techy. Cumulative layout shift. What that does is it measures in pixels how far something moves. Now, if the movement is only because of a font, it may be minor and not a problem. If it's because I am dynamically inserting ads at the top of the page and the whole page shifts, that is a problem. And you're going to need to figure that out. You're going to need to know that this is an algorithmic variable. Google has said it's in the algorithm. That makes it an index type, and that it can influence your ability to rank. Most sites, it's minimal. If you're loading a lot of fonts, and they're big fonts and different kinds of things, you may have an issue. But unless you're doing that, you're not going to see a big issue. You just want to load the page as best you can, as fast as you can, not do a lot of shifts, and make it work. Now, the amount of time and distance on this is what really is going to be impacting you. The cumulative layout shift, this is just a box that has animation in it that I can't show in a PDF. But a cumulative layout shift is measured. Again, we're down to really small time slices. You can't move anything more. You can't. It's just impossible to redesign a whole page on the fly. Now, there is a lot of code, and I'll talk about it. There's a lot of code that you can add to your page that causes parts of your page to not load up front. You can defer it. And for instance, your input delay. Got it. I can take my input box and I can tell it not to show until it's ready to run. That's kind of nice, but you better be a programmer to do it. And then I can do other things. I can come in and I can tell you, I can take all my images and defer load them, lazy load them, so that I don't show them until I scroll to them. So there's a lot of stuff like that. Not everybody is aware or is concerned about this, but it is something to pay attention to. Now, in summary, this is where we're at. Those are the thresholds. What I want to do is tell you more about all this stuff. But if you go to Defining Core Web Vitals, web.dev is a Google site. You will be able to find out all about these, their definitions, but you won't be able to find out what you can do about them. And that's really part of our problem here. You can't really get into a lot of what you can do about them. But what we want to do is go there. Now, how do I improve this largest contentful paint score? I told you at the front, I'm going to go ahead and define all these things, and I'm going to tell you what you can do to get it to be better. You have a lot of tools that you can use to measure it. Now, I think PageSpeed Insights is fine. I love webpagetest.org. I really think it's great. And part of this, you'll notice I say field or lab. All right, so the field scores are actually being gathered by Lighthouse, Chrome. The Chrome is sitting out in the wild timing things. So every time somebody loads a page, they keep track of it. And this is worldwide. By the way, I'm going to give you a little bit of a problem I found. Our scores were low. And trying to figure it out, we're running the CDN, we're running all the stuff we're supposed to be running. We research everything. We figured it all out. It turns out that I have a site around the world. I have sites around the world: Tokyo, Sydney, and Dubai, and Gurgaon in India. Well, it turns out everybody in India is running on 2G. And every time they loaded one of my sites, it was a terrible score. And I actually had to do nested CDNs in order to get the scores up, which, by the way, you can't do, but we're running nested CDNs. And it works. Your scores will improve. So if you get really techie on this, you can really do it. PageSpeed Insights. It has a section that reports field scores, But then it also has a section that reports the Lighthouse Lab scores. So you get a speed score, you get the 6 categories from field and 6 categories from lab. And by the way, don't think you're done. Don't look at it on a desktop. If you look on a desktop, you're going to get inflated scores. Apparently, they love desktops. But if you go to mobile, which is the default, you're going to get real scores. And only do mobile. And look at your scores. And what I would do is I would check them at the same time every day and write them down. And if you're deteriorating, you have a problem. You should be able to improve your scores almost daily if you make some changes that make sense. We do a lot of Core Web Vital projects, and they're not that easy. Now, we just need to understand, these are the tools that you get to use to see how well you're doing. That is what matters here. Now, why does this stuff even matter to you? Because according to Google, approximately 6% of the web has already done the work to do Core Web Vitals. And I'd be willing to bet that that 6% are the people using SEOs. And I'd be willing to bet that 6% are the websites already on the first 2 or 3 pages. So operationally, what I'm saying is you either do Core Web Vitals or you're last among equals. All else being equal, if everybody on the first page did it and you didn't, and Google is known for releasing things, then over time they turn up the dial. I think it's like at 2 or 3. I don't think it's at full volume yet. It won't get up to 11 for a while. But it's going to become more and more important. As Google emphasizes experience more and more in their systems, it is going to become increasingly important that you actually have Core Web Vital numbers that make sense. Now, I'm not saying everybody cares about search engine optimization and how much traffic it can generate. Some people believe that that's not where their persona lives. They believe that they, do it by email or whatever happens, and that's fine. But if you do care about SEO, then you don't have a choice. You're going to have to care about this. All right, so what can I do? Tip 1. You can solve largest contentful paint, much like I said, by doing a preload. Now, there's multiple ways you can do this. And in a few cases, it's pretty simple. In other cases, it isn't simple. In our case, we just did it. It took an hour, 2 hours maybe. And we put it and we tested it and it worked. And we put it everywhere because I'm very big fan on testing things on my own website. I know it sounds a little strange, but I'm a big fan of testing things on my own website. And it worked. My score for largest contentful paint dropped and everything is now pretty happy. So we're in good shape there. How do you do it? That's up to your programming team. Next, cumulative layout shift score. Okay, so that's good. How is this actually calculated? Now, I'll bet you if you ask 5 SEOs, you get 5 different answers. So we decided to check and see what kind of things happen. If we move things around on the page, what happens? Turns out that it slides. So even if you have things on your page, and it's not at the very top, but it's farther down, and it's still sliding, It's still a layout shift. So you gotta be careful on this. I would say don't reserve a space and then fill it in. Don't have it just dynamically insert itself in the DOM. The document object model is dynamic. So if you add things to what would be in the browser, it's being modified in the DOM. And if you modify it in the DOM, it is going to be seen by Google. And it's going to impact your ability to rank. So don't have anything that's going to shift around the page. Now, much like AMP, which, by the way, for those of you who don't know and have never heard me speak, I hate AMP. It was such a waste of time. But much like AMP basically said you have performance improvement if you have height and width on your images. Well, you can do that. Then the size of the image won't be dynamic. That's pretty straightforward. You can clean up a lot of code just with height and width. Alts and videos and all the things you're embedding, clean them up. Don't do it. Reserve space for it. Make it happen. These are the things that you can talk to your development team about and say, are we doing this? Or what is our score when we run our page speed insights? And my recommendation is that you talk to your programming team about it. Now, there's an awful lot of things. It was assumed that at the top of the page, that's what mattered. It turns out that it actually goes down the page over time. So if you wait a quarter second, it could still happen. So even if you delay, a content shift above a fill and block can impact you. So be careful. How do I improve my first input delay score? Well, you can make, as I mentioned, you can make it so that you don't actually enable it until all of the elements necessary to run it are there. But almost nobody has a problem with first input delay. I'd say if we ran 20 sites, 19 of them have no problem and the other one is off by a little. It's hardly ever the case that this is a problem. So if you have a problem, then you have some sort of CSS or something associated that's going to cause it to be deferred. By the way, getting rid of top of page CSS that isn't above the page, you don't need it at the top of the page, defer that stuff, break it up. You might need a programmer to get in and change your JavaScript, but it's well worth it to be able to get the rankings. So you're going to do that. Your first input delay will pretty easily be able to be accomplished. Let's just say that. Now, and I'm kind of watching what I say, because from what I have seen from the change this morning to Page Speed Insights, some of the things appear to be altered. For instance, on our own website, we were green. Now, 3/4 of our greens have become golds. And it's like Google just decided to change the ruler. Like it used to load in 0.1 seconds. It was green. Now it's not green. So we have to see, again, our research isn't done, but I want to make sure everybody understands it. Run it on your own site, Page Speed Insights. Run it on your own site, get your numbers, and talk to your developers. This is something that will be important. There are 3 variables in Core Web Vitals. All 3 are separate algorithmic variables. So it adds up. So pay a lot of attention. I can't emphasize it enough. I'm sort of on a rant over this. Now, your first input delay, you can change it, as I said, by delay until interaction. You probably don't need it, but that's what it's called. So you have the ability to actually write down delay until interaction. Go talk to your developers if your first input delay score is wrong. Page speed. Now, as I said, our page speed was really, really good. And it looks like Google just added a bunch of variables. And they give you this report. And it's how bad is it, and it diminishes over time. I think a great many of these don't matter, especially the small ones. But if all I have to do is fix 4 of them, what's the big deal? You fix them. And considering that speed is correlated to conversion, I would think you'd be anxious to fix these 4. The faster you are, the more people like your site. I mean, if you go to my site, it's pretty fast. People love it. Do it on a mobile device. You touch the link, and before you pick your finger up, it's loaded. Now watch me be wrong. But usually that influences a buying decision. So while this is nice to have, and there's a bunch of numbers and data and things like that, my opinion is this is a critical number. Now, a while back, Google indicated that they replaced the old page speed score in the algorithm with this. And now they have a new this as of this morning. So I'm expecting a change. Now, you're probably not ready for this either. Google announced yesterday, I think it was actually this morning, that at 11 o'clock Eastern, they're rolling out a brand new core update. In other words, they're changing the algorithm as of 11 o'clock this morning. Amazingly, they changed page speed insights this morning. Now, if you're like me, you might see a correlation, which means there's going to be a disturbance in the force. Everybody that's listening to this, understand you're going to care how you are performing now in Google, because it's going to change. There's a core update and new scores. And I can't believe that they're separate. I can't believe they just happen to be the same morning. Maybe. I'm not a believer. So understand we're going to have to be able to do that. So your page speed is something that you're going to care about. You're going to have to do a good job on. This is what it used to look like. Now, and I want to make sure you understand, in order to improve my largest contentful paint, I had to do a preload. When I did the preload, this dropped to 96. I'm okay with that. This morning it dropped to 46. I'm not okay with that. But we don't know quite what the problem is yet. I think they just changed the scale. 46 is the new 90. Who knows? But clearly we're going to have to go through and figure out, how we can improve things, how we can make it work. By the way, one of the things that was strange is that people would run PageSpeed Insights. They see a score of 100, and they assumed that was their Core Web Vital score. Your overall score is 100. I have no work to do. But they didn't qualify for any of the Core Web Vital numbers. This was just one number. It's page speed. It's only 1 out of 6 numbers. So it's not the entire thing. That's why they reformatted things in the new PageSpeed Insights tool. It does lie to you. By the way, if you're using a CDN and the CDN does frequent refreshes, you could be 100, 100, 120, 100, 100, 120 because of the CDN refreshes. And CDNs are erratic. And I think that Google, for getting real world scores, has like 7 data centers around the world that they use to get the scores. So it isn't everywhere. Your CDN is going to matter. Start with PageSpeed Insights, fix the things that are red messages. Then what you want to do is run webpagetest.org, because it's going to give you different suggestions. In my experience of things that we've tested, they're different. So you really want to do both in order to get your maximum score. So I would focus on that. It should work out pretty well. Should work out well for you. All right. Performance test. You have CDN information. Do not assume a big CDN is the fastest. It isn't. We actually went through and tested all of our CDNs for our kind of workload, albeit not e-commerce. And we found we like money. It's fast. And but it's not everywhere as fast. So some of the CDNs perform better in some regions of the world and some perform in others. So you really need to understand how to light things up and get your performance scores to where you want. And understand that now each web core vital element is a separate score, and it's separate by page. So some of your pages can be really good and some of them could be terrible. So if you're going to be working on your content, on your structure, on your templates, on anything, you need to get in and start at the top. And if you do it right, then following all this advice, experimenting on your own site, you're going to win. Now, if you are WordPress, there's some software out there that we have experimented with and we like. One of them is called nitropack.io. We installed it, and it totally changed our rankings and our page speed scores. We've done it on some client sites, totally changed theirs. Now, we don't know if it significantly impacted all the scores, especially as of this morning, but it is worth checking on. I'd say that is something that we want to do.
I have been, working overtime now, looking at my site. I pulled up pages on yours, and yes, you were in the 90s. And this is one of those things that I know I've spent a lot of time on, but I always need the reminder. I think so. The couple of questions that I got from the audience that I want to cover was, what do you recommend for those who have no code sites? Think of a Squarespace, something like that, because not everybody's going to have the budget, uh, obviously, to hire developers.
Yeah, that
Or
is a problem.
it may just be that they're using it for a landing page or something like that as well.
Well, there's obviously things that you can learn from this. Don't have really large images.
Mhm.
Uh, compress them wherever you can. Um, WebP is a format of an image that is from Google. And when we experimented on that image, it was amazing. Super fast. It's just an image format that I think everybody supports. Now, I can't say that everybody supports it, but I think everybody supports it. It's supported by all major browsers, including Safari. So WebP is a great way of compressing images. So, and I think most people understand that the size of the images is like half of your performance problem, right? Don't do anything exotic. Don't have a lot of anything that is terrible. I think that um, a lot of these systems, much like I think you described, even Wix or one of the other systems that is, you just sort of WYSIWYG your way through this thing, they're all working on this stuff. Now, I'm going to
Yeah.
comment
Can I
WordPress.
make a suggestion real quick before you comment?
Yes.
Close the blinds because the sun has come in and sat on your head right as we started discussing this. The afternoon, it just started to come in a little bit more and more. Sorry, what
Is
was your
this a little
suggestion
better?
then? That's 1,000 times better. Yeah. What was your
You
suggestion
didn't
then?
like my halo?
Yeah, it was truly a halo effect.
Okay. Um, the the bottom line is that, even in systems like Wix and things like that, that everybody's working on it, and Google has a development team at Google working on enhancements to WordPress. These are actually WordPress developers that are Google employees working at Google, enhancing WordPress for performance. Now, they did a product, even a plugin, and they have other things that they're looking at. But my interaction with a system that is just designed to at least I have a presence is at least I have a presence.
Mhm.
I think it's kind of hard where everything is behind a brick wall and I can't get to it. You know, a lot of the systems are built where they want to minimize the amount of support they have to provide. And one way to minimize support is to lock it down,
Mhm.
right? They
Mhm.
know what it is, it's their code, none of the strange stuff that a user might copy in. Their support bill drops. That's how they're able to offer it so cheaply. There are $1 million CDNs or content management systems out there. Adobe, Salesforce, and some of the big end, IBM. Some of those are very expensive for implementation.
Mhm.
Um, if you have something that serves a purpose and you're not about to be able to uh, affect a lot of change here, it's a problem. Now, what I would suggest is that you reach out to those system support teams and ask them what they're working on, because it could be they understand these problems and they're fixing it.
Fair enough. One quick question, then we'll cut to close. But I saw this question, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. Some of it, I think, I'll know the answer to, but the audience may not as well. When you're identifying the pages that you want to optimize first, as opposed to, as part of the website, how do you go about this of identifying those groups of pages that you need to optimize first? Because they're all going to run images, scripts, this, that, or the other. And what I was thinking of too is, as I was reading this person's question, is it could be that you got hundreds of pages in your blogs, you got hundreds of pages in other forms of content, you got hundreds of pages elsewhere. Is there any rhyme or reason that you look at as to when you go in and tackle a website, where do you start to really optimize an area?
The way we commonly do it, if you're running a blog and you happen to be WordPress, I'd look at NitroPack, something that's a site-wide kind of a plugin.
Right.
Uh, I would then start at the home page, top navigation, highest converting pages. Then, as
Fair
time
enough.
permits, I'd go to the others.
Perfect. Bruce, seriously, I was sitting here googling or just doing stuff nonstop and looking at my own site and testing the speed some others. But this is a fantastic. I'm glad we talked about doing core web vitals because this is such an important part of anybody's website today. So thank you very much. Honored to have you on stage, and I want to wish you a great rest of your day in LA.
Thank you. Talk to you guys later.